We're now going to take a look at a special piece of software that we use here on campus called V2 Cloud. And this is a environment, and it's a paid software service, by the way. So we're paying a third party to run this in the cloud for us. We used to run this service pretty much on campus, which is we used to call VDI, which stands for Virtual Desktop Interface. And we used to run a server on campus that would deliver VDI desktops. So in other words, a pre-built Windows 10 environment with all the software that our employees need in the environment. They would sit down at their computer, log in, and they would be connected to this environment at their desk, not knowing that they're not really running the software on their computer. And that's how most of the office computers at Gateway operate. They look like regular standalone computers, but truly they were operating or remote controlling an operating system sitting on a server in our closet in Kenosha. Now, they decided, as many companies do, that having this as an on-premise service didn't make sense, especially when the server started to get overburdened. They looked at different options, and what they came up with was this other service called V2 Cloud. Now, I haven't logged into this in a while, and so I'm hoping I don't have any problems. Usually I test this kind of stuff before I start class. But the V2 Cloud is our replacement, and what it is we pay into this service, and the cost is per user, by the way, and it's a combination of per user and time spent using the environment. So it's a combination. But as you're going to see, is I'm getting logged into what looks like Windows 10, and it's inside my browser. And in fact, if I hit my F11 key here, which I'm about to do, I am full screen, and you can't even tell that I'm not operating my own machine. And so I can just now log in using my standard gateway credentials here. So if I can remember my password is more important. And once I'm fully logged in, I will be in what we call a Windows 10 experience environment, technically. So it's not really Windows 10. It seems like Windows 10, but it's really operating on top of Windows Server. The reason we do this, so some people are like, well, Ty, why do you need to do this? Well, if you came to class and you had just a Chromebook and you couldn't afford a proper computer, okay, so apparently I can't sign into my account, but you're getting the idea. This is a Windows environment coming up on my screen here. Right, I'm not really sure why this is happening, but the idea is that this is preloaded with everything I need. It's connected to the campus network, and everything just works. And so if a student's coming in and they're brand new to IT, it might be easier for them, for example, to log into this and get to the software they need rather than to figure out how to install Visual Studio, for example, which is a monster of a program. And a lot of people don't have computers capable of even running it or have the money to be able to afford to buy one, right? And we predominantly use this environment for our software development program because they have special tools that they use to connect to the IBM iPower system, which is a mainframe system that we use in our software development program. And rather than take all this class time to teach people how to install the clients and the connections and configure it all, they're like, you know what? You spent half the semester doing that, and you don't learn anything. Here's the environment all set to go. We're in there working, and we just run with it. It's, for a lot of people, this is how they work on a day-to-day basis. And quite often, even when you're in a professional work environment, you're logging into an interface like this, not even realizing it. It's completely obscured from you. But this is very common, and one of the reasons that admins really like this is because if we need to do an upgrade to Windows, it's done in one spot, and then that's replicated out to every instance. So every user, I would do the upgrade once instead of having to walk to everybody's machine and do an upgrade individually, right? If I need to back it up, it's all on one server. I just back up to one server. If the server is running live and it's self-replicating, which good servers are, it'll never go down. It'll never fail. So this is the why a lot of organizations choose it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this interface here, and then I'm going to demonstrate now server virtualization. So a lot of times when we're working on campus. We're connecting to servers. I know a couple of you have been in our web program, for example, and in the web program, we have a server that we call Apollo that all of our web students load their web pages on. So they learn how to code for the web, and we throw it on Apollo. And Apollo's basically a physical server sitting in the closet at the Racine campus, and it's just one of those single rack space servers, and that's running directly on the server. So this Apollo is not a virtualized environment. This is actually an operating system running on a physical machine, and Apollo occupies the whole thing. And so that is a non-virtualized server environment. We're really connecting to an actual computer here, running an actual operating system. And if you're curious, it's Ubuntu server that we're running, and its job is to act as a web server for our students and a database server. So I think we have roughly 1,500 active accounts on that server right now. And Cindy Lou and Jill, I know you guys both probably still have accounts on that machine. And if not on this machine, maybe Kronos, which preceded it. But we do have another server that we're building right now. And in fact, I was actually hoping to launch it this spring, but thanks to the pandemic, made it kind of challenging to launch it. And these are just splash pages, folks. So this is the home page for Prometheus, which is our new web server. We hope to deploy it maybe as soon as a couple of weeks from now. Worst case scenario by fall. But this server is a virtualized server. So it does the same thing Apollo does, but this is not a physical computer I'm connecting to. It is a virtualized virtual machine that sits on top of a physical server. And so what I'm going to demonstrate for you now, and I do have to do this via IP address, and you'll have to excuse me for a second. I'm going to pause the recording while I find my login info. I have so many logins, I don't remember them all, frankly. So give me a moment, please. Sure. So as I paused here to get my server login information, Cindy Lou asked me a question. She put it in the chat, so I just thought I'd drag it onto the screen here. And it's an excellent question, because when you're working in these virtual environments, how do you save your files? Well, in many of the virtual environments, including the V2 Cloud we were looking at, that is actually connected to our network infrastructure on campus. So when we log in, we use the same login that we would use on campus for the network, and then we get connected to all the network resources. So the answer is to, like, where do you save it? It's preferred you don't save in the environment. That's what the admins recommend, because they can never guarantee that stuff might not disappear or fail. So what you do is you use your cloud-based services like Google Drive or OneDrive or Dropbox, or you save your stuff on a network save location. So we have, for all of our users on the Gateway network that are signed into the Windows domain, those people all have disk space on our servers where they can store files for work. Then we have shared locations, and now a lot of people have really moved away from the network shares and are really using Google Drive primarily through Gateway. But we also have OneDrive and every other tool that you can think of. But that's a really good question. In some cases, you can kind of get those virtual environments to write stuff to USB drives or USB connected hard drives. I found that to be very buggy myself. And so if I'm saving something on a virtual desktop, it's always going to the cloud pretty much if I want to make sure I keep it. But excellent question. Excellent question. Now, going back to this whole virtualized server thing, what I'm going to do now, and see, I don't memorize these IP addresses or any of this stuff, so that's why I actually have to like type them in here and look for them. But this is the IP address for the host server, one of 5 servers we have in our data analytics server rack, by the way, on campus. So if we were on campus, the machine I'm connecting to is right in the next room, right? Here we are at home, we're doing it virtually, but I would connect to it very much the same way, through an IP address. And what's happening here, and notice, the software here, because we talked about VMware just real briefly there, but we're running on our server. So the host operating system for our server is VMware, which is a flavor of Linux custom designed for servers, and more importantly, to virtualize other servers. So I'm going to log into this and see if I can remember my darn password. I think that's right. And if it works, we'll find out. Okay, it's working. And so what I'm doing now is I'm connecting to the operating system of the server remotely. And this is how server admins work, folks. So like if you work somewhere and your admins do this with their servers all day long. They might be sitting at their desk, but they're remote controlling machines in the closet or in the cloud in some cases too. And this machine that we have is a powerhouse. I don't know the exact specs on it, but it's got two large multi-core processors, and I want to say, well, yeah, let's see here. 40 logical processors. I think this is for the host system. So 40 logical processors of Intel Xeon Golds running at 2.4 gigahertz, however fast that is. And we have close to 200 gigs of RAM running on that machine for the host. And all the different resources. And this is a control panel where I can kind of see the grand overview of what's happening on that machine. Now, in this category here from this screen, we show a listing of our virtual machines. Now, this is kind of bizarre because we only have one on there, and it happens to be the Ubuntu web server that's running this website. And it's just one virtual server. So what we've done with this virtual server is we create within the host server a virtualized environment. We allocate a certain amount of the CPU cores, a certain amount of the RAM, and a certain amount of the storage. And that storage becomes, all those resources actually become isolated from the rest of the system and operate as if they only belong to this one computer system. And then once those are allocated, and you can see, I'm just trying to see like how many CPU cores do I have allocated to this machine. It looks like I have 20 of them, 64 gigs of RAM, and a terabyte of hard drive is currently allocated to that machine. I can also remote control that machine through this interface. So this is kind of interesting. So just by double clicking, and I just want to remind you, I'm doing it all through a web browser, right? I have no special software installed. Now I have a screen as if I had a monitor plugged into the server directly to that virtual machine. And here's the interface, and it's waiting for me to log in. And let's see if I can remember this password. I have to look at my spreadsheet, honestly, to remember it. I have no recollection of what the passwords are because I have so darn many. And provided that's correct, all right, so now I'm logged into that server, and I can even take it a step further, and I think this is bizarre because I can make this full screen. And once again, now this isn't really pretty because Ubuntu isn't scaling, but I can set it up to scale, but I can make this fill the whole screen. And yes, we have a GUI interface on a Ubuntu server, even though most of the work we usually do on the server is from the command line, by the way. But this interface allows me to remote control that web server, do backups, add users, whatever task I need to do, I can do directly through this interface without having to travel to campus to do it. And I think that's kind of astounding. The fact that this server also operates or has the capability to operate other servers on top of it is pretty fascinating. This particular machine is only running the web server. Some of our other data servers are running multiple operating systems, each with specific tasks. Probably the most notable one is we have a couple of database servers running on our main server, which you guys will access during some of your classes. And then we also have a server running that feeds in data from all the industrial robots at our manufacturing center that we can then pull the data from and visualize and do all sorts of interesting things. And when you kind of think about this virtual machine interface, I have one machine listed, but this machine probably could run 20 servers simultaneously, all at the same time. Each their own unique instance with their own IP address, with their own hardware resources. And the beauty of it is when you wrap it all up and you analyze what compromises that virtual machine, it's two things. A collection of settings on the host server that keep track of, RAM, CPU, etc. And then one single file on the hard drive that is the hard drive of that virtual machine. To back up that virtual machine, I back up one file. To replicate it, I copy that one file. To move it to a different server, I take that one file, move it to the other server, recreate the settings, I'm up and running. And most of the server work that you do out on the internet, most of the applications you connect to typically are applications that run on virtualized servers on top of an interface, most likely the same interface that I'm using here. And I know this is a little bit of a mind bender to think about because you don't think of computing in these terms, but when we talk about the cloud, folks, this is how the cloud operates. And, it's going more this way, not less. And even the skills to operate these machines, if you're like really intrigued by this kind of stuff, you should probably be in our networking program because that's where you learn this, right? In the data program, it doesn't hurt to know this stuff, but we don't really dig deep into the mechanics of this, but we will utilize all the servers that we create to do work. And, because the data program is still pretty brand new, we're going to be adding more and more of this stuff as you go. So hopefully by the time you graduate, we have even more of this stuff built up. And when we're in the classroom, you'll get to see these machines because they're literally right in the next room, which is pretty cool. When you're connecting to a server and you don't, attribute it to being somewhere physical, but then you can look through the glass wall and see it in the rack and walk over and touch it even. So when we are on campus in fall of 2021, when we go back, you guys are all welcome, to check all the gear out. In fact, that's probably one of the first things we do when we're back in the classroom is just kind of tour the facility because you guys are doing this data program without even being on site. And those of you that have been on site there, it's a very, very impressive facility. I just went through like a $10 million upgrade for the building. And we have some of the most cutting edge gear in that building. I just got a demo, and I hope we get to play with some of this stuff too, of our 3D imaging software. So they have like these 3D scanners, and I'm sure you guys have seen them. People have little handheld ones, and they have ones that are a box. Basically, you put stuff in there and scan it. But they have this new 3D scanner on campus now, where it's a device you can just walk into a room, and it will scan the entire room and everything in it down to 1 micron and create a perfect digital representation of it in 3D space. And we have that on site, just a couple rooms over from our data classroom. And so all this stuff is there for us to play with. Very few people are using it, but I would really, I would enjoy playing with the gear. And I think that if you guys are really geeky like me, you'll probably dig it too. It's all that cutting edge stuff which is where the fun is, And I think the data program gives you that opportunity to push that cutting edge. So that's why I find this all very exciting. Right, that's going to cap this little lecture piece.